The Chicago Bears need to stop the bleeding, but they face a Green Bay Packers team that is entering that time of year where Jordan Love gets hot at the right time. And this one feels like it could be messy for a very one-sided rivalry in the NFC North. A lot to get into on today's Crossover Thursday Locked On Bears, Locked On Packers podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Bears and Locked On Packers. I'm Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears, alongside Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, here to preview this first divisional game of the season for the Chicago Bears and kicking off when Jordan Love starts to take some fire here. So we'll kind of look at how bad things are going in Chicago right now, how optimistic they are for things to keep taking off in Green Bay, and whether this matchup will just kind of be more of the same for how this rivalry has gone in recent years. Our Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Peter, you're on the road, so let's start with the Green Bay Packers here. Team was getting pretty hot with a 4-game winning streak before a tough one in Detroit prior to the bye week, but now a chance to sort of reset and get into Jordan Love's Toyota-thon prime, where he always really good this time of year. I guess how high are expectations right now coming out of the bye?
I mean, expectations are really, really high for the Packers internally. I think the Packers fan base, it's a tough one to go into the bye week on that Detroit game. I think fans took that a little bit harder than maybe they should have. Lions fans celebrated it a little bit harder than maybe they should have. But that's the nature of the beast. We deal mostly in outcomes around here, right? The winning and the losing is the only thing that ultimately matters. But to your point about Jordan Love, the questions this year about the turnovers, about the structure of the offense, they've been doing less play action, less under center work, in part because Jordan Love has been hurt essentially every week since week one. He's played with some form of malady. Even when he says the knee's not bothering him, he's got the knee brace on. You could see it against the Lions with the groin injury. They're running a 2-minute offense and he can't get down the field. I thought they were going to have to Byron Leftwich him at one point and carry him down the field because it's clearly bothering him. And when you look at last year, Lorin, Jordan Love was top 10 in EPA per play on dropbacks without play action. This year, he's 22nd. And to me, that is indicative of a guy who in structure and outside of structure, where we know he's really good, he's just not the same guy physically that he's been. And so when you couple the fact that he's getting healthy, and that this is exactly the time of year. Week 10 last year was the demarcating line. All the stats, the second half stats. Week 10 was the demarcating line that said Jordan Love after this was statistically the best quarterback in the NFL. We've reached that. We've reached that scary hour for Jordan Love.
So is there any thought to like maybe shutting down Jordan Love for a little bit longer just to try and get him 100% healthy for the playoffs when it matters a little bit more? Or does this feel like the kind of thing that is never really going to go away during the regular season? Like he needs months of the offseason to really get right. And so you just got to ride it out.
If you ask Jordan Love, he will tell you the knee is not bothering him. And we actually had his rehab specialist on last week. And he said, they feel good about the plan that they're on. There was a push among Packers fans to sit Love against the Lions, dealing with the groin injury, not rush him back, give him 3 full weeks to get right. As it is, he's going to have he's not going to do much in practice this week, I assume, but he had the whole bye week. And now this additional time, it doesn't seem like it's the kind of thing, like if it was such a bad groin strain that he needs 3-4 weeks to get right, then he probably wouldn't have played against the Lions, I think, unless he exacerbated it in that game. And the indication is that he didn't. So while I think that is something that is easy for you and I to say, from the comfort of our desk chairs, it's just not something that I think regularly happens in the NFL. It was something that last year, you look at like Dak Prescott, they probably should have sat for a little bit, or like Aaron Rodgers in 2022, probably should have sat for like a month to get his body right. But that would have meant Jordan Love would have had to play, and Rodgers was not about to let that happen. So it's just not the way that this works. I was going to say, unfortunately, I'm not even sure it's unfortunate. If he's fine, like if he looks like he's moving well in this game, it's not a coincidence that the offense looked its best against the Cardinals and the Texans when Jordan Love was at his healthiest. And then in the Jags, he looked pretty good until he pulled his groin. So I'm not worried about it, but he does have to get healthy. He feels a little snake bit this year, Lorin.
Yeah, that's
and I know Bears fans are going, "Oh, boo-hoo! Are you seeing what is happening in Chicago right now?" But I think that almost makes it worse that like the offensive line is playing or more frustrating because the offensive line is playing well. You got more than you even expected out of someone like Josh Jacobs. You're getting this breakout season from Tucker Kraft. Christian Watson has stayed healthy for the first time in his career. And it's like, man, if Jordan Love had just been healthy, this team might have an extra win or two at this point. And that's just not the reality that we live in.
What about Green Bay's defense? It felt like they were settling in a little bit there, where they kind of found the right mix of lineup at linebacker and safety and some of the cornerback spots. But then they were a little vulnerable against Trevor Lawrence a couple weeks ago, and then I guess they played pretty well against Detroit. I mean, Jared Goff did Jared Goff things, but like, how much progress do you think they really have made? And I don't know that it makes a huge difference against this Bears offense right now, but I guess what's your confidence level there?
Yeah. The Trevor Lawrence was one of those funny ones because Trevor Lawrence just played outside of his body in the second half of that game. Like they could do nothing in the first half of that game. They lose Christian Kirk and somehow get better. And I think they even lost Evan Ingram at one point. And he's just like, he's throwing a backup tight ends and rookies and just like dotting these guys up, like putting the ball everywhere he wants. And sometimes that happens, right? Like it's not going to happen against Mac Jones, as the Vikings found out last week. But Trevor Lawrence is the kind of quarterback who can do that. I have been begging people, and you can call it cope if you want. Just go back and watch the Lions game, knowing now the ending. I think in the moment it felt a little different. Jared Goff completed 2 passes beyond 10 yards of the line of scrimmage in that football game. I know that you like, oh, he started 12 of 12 on 3-yard throws. They will dink and dunk you to death. That's what the Lions do. But they scored 17 offensive points. This is a team that had just scored 40 and 50. And so I understand that the rain played a factor, but I actually thought the Packers held them to fewer than 5 yards per play. This is the most explosive offense in the league outside of Baltimore. So I think this defense is trending in the right direction. They did not have Jair Alexander in that game. They did not have Evan Williams in that game. We had an awesome conversation with Evan Williams on Locked On Packers yesterday for Bears fans that might want to go. He played against Caleb Williams in college at the University of Oregon. Just a really good chat that I think even Bears fans would find interesting. They've found something in this group of safeties with Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, Javon Bullard in the slot. Jair Alexander is expected to play this week. We do expect Evan Williams back this week. We expect Josh Myers back this week. So this is the healthiest the Packers have been most of the season. It's defensively a crucial thing for a team that really does not have great corner depth. It's Jair Alexander and a bunch of guys. And when you have Ja, they can play great. And when you don't, it's pretty obvious that he's not out there.
Well, it's the healthiest the Packers maybe have been all season, and it's about the most injured the Chicago Bears have been all season. So we'll switch sides and take a look at the mess that is the Chicago Bears right now as we continue our crossover Thursday Locked On Packers, Locked On Bears podcast. This episode of Locked On Bears and Locked On Packers is brought to you by our friends at Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, totally free, zero cost to you. So you can continue your education or just pique some of your curiosity. They've got some really cool history classes like the rise and fall of the Roman Republic or the Great American Story. You can also get into free market economics. They've got a classical music class. They've got mathematics and chemistry and so many other cool things you can learn. And all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever you want and tune in wherever you are. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. I mean, it's great. It's like all the benefits of higher learning without all of the cost that usually comes with that student loan debt and all that not so fun stuff. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu. A Crossover Thursday is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can get started with $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. If you hit your bet and it wins, not only do you get the winnings from your $5 bet, but they're going to add $150 in bonus bets into your account. So if you wanted to bet $5 on this Bears-Packers game, right now it's Bears plus 5.5 or Packers minus 5.5 on the point spread. The money line is Packers minus 255 or the Bears plus 210 straight up, and the over-under is set at 40.5 points. A winning $5 bet on any of those or any of your other favorite sports on FanDuel, and you're going to get $150 in bonus bets added into your account. That includes live bets as well. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Continuing our Locked On Packers, Locked On Bears crossover podcast, Lorin Cox alongside Peter Bukowski. We turn our attention to the Chicago Bears, who fired their offensive coordinator on Tuesday and released their biggest free agent mistake, signing in Nate Davis on Wednesday. So they're in CYA mode and cleanup mode and trying to desperately turn around a season that, they're 4-5, right? It's not like they're at the very bottom of the NFL, and yet they only scored 3 points against the New England Patriots last week, where it's about as embarrassing as you feel like it could get. And, oh, great, now they get to play the Packers on Sunday. So perfect timing for this matchup, Peter, where Bears had 4 backup offensive linemen last week, and there's not a lot of optimism that this will be the one that they turn it around.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Lorin, I always appreciate about you is you are never in CYA mode. You are always going to provide some actual analysis down the line. That is not just like, let's just cover for everything that's happening here. And what we talked about last year, I think at the end of the season, I think we even hit on it on the crossover, if I recall correctly, this decision to bring Eberflus back. And then we didn't know at the time, of course, that it's going to be Shane Waldron and all that stuff. What to you is the single biggest reason they are at this point right now?
I mean, it is bringing Eberflus back, right? I mean, that's why they're here. But it just feels to me like a organizational disconnect in direction here, right? Like the whole plan was to support Caleb Williams and make things as stable for him as possible and as easy for him as possible. And so then they bring him in and try and make things as difficult for him as possible. They put everything on his plate, right? They let him from week 1. You're calling protections at the line of scrimmage. You're audibling plays. We're giving you the whole gamut, and we're just going to see how much you can handle. And then maybe
kind of a victim of his own competency in that way, right? Like the fact that they even thought he could do that is pretty telling about the way that they view him.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be a compliment, right? I mean, it's supposed to be a good thing. It's supposed to be like, oh, yes, this #1 overall pick quarterback can handle things. But it's just such a stark contrast to what Drake May and Jane Daniels are doing and being asked to do by their respective offenses, where they said, hey, like, we could keep the training wheels on for a little while and really make sure that you're learning to ride, especially I think in New England, where the supporting cast is not nearly as strong as those other two teams. And for the Bears, it just has never really come together. He hasn't been on the same page with the receivers perfectly. The offensive line has been falling apart. And all of a sudden, what was supposed to be a great landing spot for Caleb Williams has become a disaster.
So what is the difference to you? Because we aren't that far removed, Lorin, from, hey, here come the Bears. They blow out the Panthers. They blow out the Jaguars. The offense looks good. What is the biggest difference between that team and the team that we saw on Sunday?
It feels to me like a cracking in the foundation of like the locker room of the trust and faith in their coaching staff. And I think it had always been simmering a little bit, but when they were winning, it was fine. But once you have the Hail Mary disaster against Washington, I think that kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back for players that were like, okay, like I can kind of buy in on what we're doing here. It's kind of working. Like I can see the faith, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, clearly things that the coaching staff are deciding are holding us back. Like we as the players feel like our talent is not being utilized properly and not being maximized. And now there's a lot of, inner divisiveness about, who belongs and what, and people are publicly questioning coaching decisions and coming out to the media and saying stuff and leaking stuff. And that's where everything falls apart because Matt Eberflus's whole appeal here, you bring him back because he's the locker room guy. He's the culture guy, the CEO. He's not some defensive mastermind in terms of scheme. Like he's not an idiot as a schemer, but he's not the X's and O's guy, right? He's a locker room culture guy. And now that you're starting to lose that, it's like the movie Office Space. Like, what is it you say you do here? It's not X's and O's and it's not culture.
The frustrating part has to be for Bears fans that the defense is still really good. And I know that the run defense has not been as good of late, but you look at the passing defense, the underlying metrics, you just go, hey, if this offense were just like passable, they'd be fighting in the mix for an NFC playoff. And they still are, right? Like if they played like they did against the Panthers and the Jaguars, they could be back in this mix. The problem is, I just don't know how you have faith that happens. I pulled these numbers. I want to ask you what you think the biggest problem is. So the deep passing number, so on throws over 20 yards. This was something that Caleb Williams, beautiful deep ball thrower at USC. They have the 6th most attempts, Caleb does. He's got the fewest completions. He's 8 of 38 on these throws, and he is last in percentage of passes deemed catchable. Only 4 big-time throws. That is also last. This is supposed to be the place where you go, these are the wow throws Caleb Williams can make. That rollout on the run dime from the preseason. I think there was even one in week 1 too, wasn't there, to Roma Dunze down the sideline? And it was just like, yeah, that stuff. We're not even seeing that stuff. So to your mind, why is that?
The biggest problem there is a coaching staff mentality that they've ingrained in him. Do not turn over the ball. Do not make mistakes. Like they've wanted him to be
head coach problem.
Well, exactly. And they have really calmed him down. Like if you look at the PFF big time throws and turnover worthy throws, like in the last 3 games, he's had 0 turnover worthy throws, but only 1 big time throw. Like they very much ingrained in him, don't take big chances. And so I think when he does take those shots downfield, he's a little hesitant to rip it. And then I think when he does, he'll sail a little bit, or he'll try and put it in the safer spot as opposed to just trusting that, hey, I might have to fire this in a tight window, but that's how I'm going to make this play because I'm the playmaker. I think early on there were just some timing and relationship with the wide receiver issues where it's like, okay, I'm expecting DJ Moore to be faster or not as fast or whatever. And like the first couple weeks, we could kind of excuse it as that, but ever since then, it's become more and more apparent that he's just not decisive enough in terms of, like, you can see him, he looks at it and he's like, turn it over because passes on that read because, well, I'm not supposed to turn the ball over and then sacked because he's holding the ball too long. Like it feels like the instruction has been counterproductive to what makes Caleb Williams great.
One of the big problems for him is that this offensive line has been a nightmare. Injuries have been a big part of that. You mentioned the 4 backup offensive line in the game last week. How much of that is going to change this week? Does it look like, in terms of just like healthy bodies, whether or not the healthy bodies are any good is also a question, but usually the starters are better than the backups. They're starters for a reason, generally.
Yeah. I think there's optimism that the Bears could get a starter or 2 back, but maybe not at 100%. None of the injuries that they have on the offensive line right now are guys that have, required a short-term injured reserve stint. So like guys have been, limited at practice and then not able to go on Sunday. So you feel like any given week they could take that step forward, and any given week they could still be backed up a little bit. And then when they do get healthy, like Tevin Jenkins hasn't been able to really finish games very well when he's been on the field. So I would expect a slightly healthier offensive line this week, but far from a fully healthy offensive line. And the defenses have found ever since the Washington game that the key to beating this Bears defense, this Bears offensive line, is just blitz and stunt the crap out of them. Just send extra rushers. They can't pass them off. They can't pick it up, and they haven't given Caleb Williams options to get rid of the ball quickly. There's not a lot of hot routes and sight adjustments in the offense. Like that's one of the things that leads to an offensive coordinator change. They just haven't had answers for that, and I expect Green Bay to dial it up and test them once again, regardless of who's out there.
Yeah, that was what happened against Tennessee, where Jeff Hafley said, we are going to simulated pressure the heck out of you, and then on 3rd down, we are going to bring everybody and dare you to pick it up. And one of the cool things he does, and this is a Brian Flores thing, this is a Mike McDonald thing, we're seeing teams do this more and more, is he will say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to show 6. We're only going to bring 4. But in addition to that extra body coming off the corner, we're going to run this game on the other side so that now you really don't know as an offensive line what to do. These defenses are changing protection rules more than they've ever done. And it's really fun to watch unless you're the team that they're doing it against, because then it's kind of a nightmare. And the Packers experienced this against Brian Flores. I think Jeff Hafley is going to have a similar conversation here this week as they get ready for Caleb Williams. But I think that leads us to Keith's victory here, Lorin. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's like Packers don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's a great formula here to take down the Chicago Bears, and we'll kind of take a look at what that looks like. And gosh, if the Bears are going to find some way to pull off an upset, what that might look like as well. Coming up next on our Crossover Thursday, Locked On Bears, Locked On Packers podcast. This Crossover Thursday podcast is presented by Prize Picks, the better way to play daily fantasy sports, because Prize Picks puts you in complete control. Unlike the other daily fantasy platforms where, you're setting a lineup and competing that lineup against 500 other lineups, and you only really win anything if you get first place in that big group. With Prize Picks, it's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks sets stats for a bunch of different players, and you pick whether they will do more or less than their Prize Picks projection. And if you get your picks right on at least 2 players, you can win up to 100 times your money. So you could set Josh Jacobs' rushing yards, or Caleb Williams' passing yards, or field goals made by either of the kickers in this game. Not just this game, though, but all of your favorite sports are all available on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Whether that $5 lineup is successful or not, they're going to put an extra $50 into your account when you download the app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at Prize Picks. Run your game. Thanks for tuning in to our Crossover Thursday Locked On Bears, Locked On Packers podcast. I'm Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears, here with Peter Bukowski from Locked On Bears. And our Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Peter, let's start with some Green Bay Packers keys to victory, because that feels like the most obvious outcome here. It's a 5.5-point spread. The betting odds are definitely in Green Bay's favor, but Chicago hoping for a fired offensive coordinator bump, but it moved the line.
Hey, it moved the line a whole point.
Oh, golly gee. They can lose by less than
that's a lot.
But where do you see the plan here for Green Bay to keep holding this Bears offense down and try and get some points on a pretty good Bears defense?
I think the key is no turnovers. That's got to be what they're looking at. And last year we talked about Toyota-thon Jordan Love. Last year in the second half from week 10 on, until that 49ers game when he threw 2 interceptions, he only threw 1 the entire back half of that season. And it came after a game, the Pittsburgh Steelers game, where he threw 2 interceptions in the second half, trying to lead the team back. And to a man, they mentioned that game as the game where everyone on the offense realized we have the potential to be really, really good. Even in a game where Jordan Love threw 2 interceptions. So you go back and you look at Detroit, and he's got the pick 6 that just looks so Mickey Mouse. He couldn't see Kirby Joseph. I will continue to contend that it was still a bad play. No one freak out, but it wasn't as bad a play as it looked on the broadcast angle. Cause if you watch the end zone angle, he's like blocked out by Zach Tom. You can't see him. He's little. So that's the key to me is you don't give this offense for the Bears short fields. Don't give them life. Don't give them reason to be excited. And I think that's going to be the key. Now, the dead cat bounce of the OC firing, is this something that you think could be real? I mean, I look at what the Panthers did last year when Thomas Ron was the offensive coordinator, and I go, that seems pretty bad too. So I don't know that you mentioned this on Locked On Sports today earlier in the week. Like, you take the passing game coordinator and elevate him, and the passing game was the problem. So like, what are you really getting that's different? But what do you think for this offense is going to be the key to scoring enough to stay with Green Bay?
Well, you look at what Thomas Brown did last year as the Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator. He did put up 30 on Joe Barry's Green Bay Packers defense.
Joe Barry ain't walking through that door, Lorin.
No, but I don't expect the Bears to come out with some drastically different offense in 4 days with a new offensive coordinator. But I think what Bears fans are looking for from the offense is kind of a vibe change and a little bit of a culture change, where the most damning thing from the end of the Shane Waldron era was at the end of the Patriots game last week. Caleb Williams was sacked 9 times, and he was sacked twice in the final 2 minutes. And the last sack of the game, a Patriots player helped Caleb Williams up and dapped him on the helmet. You're not seeing offensive linemen run over and say, "Oh my God, our quarterback just got hit."
Two linemen watched a Patriot do that. They watched.
Yes. They just stood there and watched. And so that feels like an offensive players that's just not bought in. So like for the Bears, if they could just buy in a little bit on offense, I think you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Like we just talked about earlier, the Detroit Lions plan against the Packers in their last game. Throw it 3 yards at a time. Like just make it easy especially if the Packers are going to blitz the Bears a lot and try and test this offensive line. get rid of the ball quickly, make it a dink and dunk thing, and try and run the ball and take so much more off of Caleb Williams' plate. And hopefully maybe lean on your defense. They've been holding teams under 20 points pretty much all season. That shouldn't be too tall of a task for an average offense to try and score 20 points in a game. It just has been all season in Chicago.
I wonder if, and I hear you, I wonder if, I think if you're the Packers, what you'd be most worried about is an offensive coordinator change, and the new guy comes in and says, "Hey, Caleb, let's just not worry about it. Let's just go play. Just grip it and rip it." And that in a week, I think it's unlikely, but that in a week, he sort of finds a little bit of his mojo from USC, where he can maybe extend some plays and hit some big ones down the field. I think if, like, let's say the Bears lose this week, let's just say, for instance, and let's say they lose next week. In some ways, am I crazy for thinking that could unlock the best part of Caleb Williams down the stretch? Because then it's like, okay, the pressure of the season, which was always crazy that we're going to make the playoff stuff. I thought that was always way, way too far. But then once that is kind of out the door and you can just play, if you're Caleb Williams, isn't that the best thing for him to just say, hey, pressure's off. Let's just go grip it and rip it. Like, I think if you're the Packers, your worry is he finds a little bit of that mojo this week. You turn the ball over twice, and all of a sudden this is a 20-17 game in the fourth quarter. And you're going, hey, how did this happen? Like that is, to me, the thing that I would be most worried about from a Packers perspective. Like, if they want to make this 3 yards, like if it's going to be screens to DJ Moore all game, I think the Packers would say, sign us up for that. And I don't know if DJ Moore would even like that, even though I think he wants to be targeted more. It seems like he still wants Justin Fields to be the quarterback. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, that would be the thing that I'd be most worried about, is just like rekindling some of that, like, F it. Let's just let Jordan Addison down there somewhere from 2 years ago at USC. Like, let's just see if we can run that offense, and chuck it up to Rome Odunze a couple of times. He Randy Moss's Keyshawn Nixon. I think that's what I would be most worried about.
Yeah, I can see where when your offense is struggling so poorly, they just aim for volatility, right? Like, instead of keeping things safer, just say, okay, go for the high variance and say, screw it, we'll just try everything, because what do we got to lose at this point? I mean, I still feel
That's kind of how Jordan Love plays all the time.
The problem is, like, Matt Eberflus is still the head coach, right? And so, like, the conservative take it easy edict comes from top down. Like, can your offensive coordinator go behind his back and say, hey, don't worry about what he's saying, let's just let it rip and have fun with it? Like, that's where it gets to be a big concern for me. So, Peter, it's a 5.5 point spread as we record this right now. I think we're both expecting a Green Bay Packers victory, but what kind of outcome do you predict from a point spread standpoint?
Yeah, it sounds like the Packers could be getting Marshawn Lloyd back in this offense. At least he'll get a chance to play. Jordan Love is going to be healthy. Josh Myers is going to be healthy. I like what this offense has been able to do. It should have been less of a game last year, the last week of the season, than it was. The Packers dropped 2 touchdowns in that game that turned into field goals. I think this is like 27-17, that kind of thing. I think the Packers win. I think they cover. I think Bears fans are hoping that this is the nadir of their season, and I'm not 100% sure that it is.
The Bears haven't scored 17 points a ton of times this season, so I'm not super confident they can get that high. But I appreciate you.
I first said 24-14. But I think 10 points is the sort of the demarcating line for me. I think, coming off the bye, the Bears coming off their worst loss of the season, the vibes are. I don't think a coordinator change changes the vibes. I think the vibes are absolutely. I was going to say a bad word. I think they're really bad right now. And you could put in whatever expletive you thought I was going to use in there, and the answer is probably yes, unfortunately. So yeah, I think that's where we are. I think this is a 10-point game. I think Green Bay starts to get right a little bit. But I'll tell you, Packers fans when Packer fans get confident in a division rival game, they get nervous. They're like, okay, we should beat this team by 10. That means it's going to be a 1-score game at the end, and we're going to be sweating this out. That is just how I think all fans, frankly, are conditioned to think of this. There's some nervousness about the dead cat bounce of this OC thing. I'm just going to tell you that, especially soccer fans, because it seems to happen all the time in soccer.
But I hate to bring this up because my fans won't want to hear it, but like, haven't the Packers beaten the Bears 10 times in a row, and you're worried that this time is going to be the one that, like, of all the times to to not be worried that the Bears are going to win. This feels like the one week where you can say,
Listen,
like, maybe by week 18, the Bears will figure something out and you can be worried. But like, this is as low as the Bears have been in a couple of years right now.
I agree. I don't see it. But I think if you're also the kind of person who's like momentum is not a thing, then maybe you think, hey, like, this is fine. But I love analytics. I think those people are wrong. I think momentum is a thing. And I also think it's week to week. It's just different. Like I don't see any evidence that this Bears team is going to play a game where they score 24 points. I don't see any evidence. And so if all I have is vibes in terms of like the reason that they could be better, and I think the vibes are terrible, then that seems like a bad recipe. Like that, I think you're being disingenuous if you think the Bears are, if you would predict the Bears to win. Can they win? Sure. It's the NFL. Anyone can win. Mac Jones almost beat the Vikings last week. But the Packers are better. They're just better. And I think if the Packers are the team we think they are, I said this, the Jaguars game, I said this, the Cardinals game, then you win the game, and you win the game comfortably. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I find myself hovering around like 20-13 Green Bay. Like the Bears are going to touchdown a couple field goals. Packers won't, run away.
That would be annoying to Packers fans, is what I'll tell you.
Say that again.
That would be annoying to Packers fans if that was the outcome, unless it's like a late touchdown. Like if it's 20-6 and they score at the end and it's 20-13, then I think that would be okay. But yeah, I think that score would be annoying to Packers fans.
Yeah, no, I was thinking like, yeah, the Packers have a double-digit lead for most of the game. Bears get a field goal or too late to try and bring a little bit closer. But I think Green Bay is going to be sweating this one for 4 quarters, but the Bears won't completely roll over. They'll care a little bit more.
Is the weather going to be okay? I haven't even looked.
I haven't looked either, but looking at my own forecast around here, I don't expect it to be terrible, but I haven't looked like specifically, down.
It's going to be nice. It's going to be fine.
Well, it'll be nice in the skies. I don't know if it'll be nice on the field, but hey, no matter what happens in the game, we'll break it down for you on Locked On Packers and Locked On Bears. So be sure to subscribe and check out all of our daily analysis of our NFC North teams. Don't forget to come back tomorrow for our Friday edition of the show. I'm sure we'll be at post-game bringing you some great content as well. And next week and Monday and every single week, the season rolls on no matter what happens in the Bears-Packers matchup. So for Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, I'm Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.